This is my mother's family, and this would have been taken in Halle in Germany in 1928. And the twins, that on the right is my mother, Hannah, and on the left is her brother, Hans. And then the older sister, who's 7 years older, Eva, and their mother, Trudy, and their father, Willy Korn. And I'm not sure where this was taken, but they all look quite happy together, I think. My mother's family came from Germany before the war, and they were in a place called Halle, which is near Leipzig, and they were a Jewish family, quite comfortably off, not very religious, and the family consisted of my grandparents, and then they had a daughter called Eva, and then 7 years later they had twins called Hans and Hannah, and Hannah's my mother. And Eva was a bit put out at the birth of these twins, you know, when she was 7. Yeah. So they had an ordinary sort of established, assimilated life. They went to school. I've got a certificate of my mum's from a swimming test. She loved reading. She played with her dolls, but gradually things were getting worse in Nazi Germany from the time of 1933 when Hitler got into power. So as you can see, the twins are growing up. So here's Hannah and Hans, and they've got their pram and lots of dolls, and it looks like they're playing nicely and also quite dressed up. And my grandmother probably took this photo, their mother, because she was really good at taking photos. Like probably lots of children, my mother learnt to swim in the river, and this is her certificate for having passed a swimming test in August 1937. So she would have been about 8, and one of the things I love about this is that her swimming teacher is called Fräulein Miss Humpsch. What's chilling about this is that her street in Halle, where she lives, Hannah lives, is already called Adolf Hitler Ringstraße. So they've already changed the name of the street, which is a main road in Halle, and this to name it after Hitler. And at one point, Jewish children weren't allowed to go to school anymore, so they just, got educated at home. But that was obviously a big blow. The key thing that pushed a lot of families into trying to leave Nazi Germany was Kristallnacht, or the Reichspogrom, as they call it in Germany, so the state riot. And that was on the 9th of November 1939. And at that time, the Nazis arrested most of the Jewish men everywhere across the country and took them to camps. And my grandfather was taken to Buchenwald. And they also looted the shops, and this was ordinary people got involved as well. It was just very apparent that Jewish people weren't safe there anymore. And when my grandfather was released from Buchenwald, my grandmother said he was really gaunt and just looked really different. His head was shaved, he was quite ill really. So at that time, my grandmother got back into contact with an English Jewish friend who she'd met at a school in Switzerland. When she was in her late teens, and asked her if she could help. And she was called Mary. We knew her as Aunt Mary. And Mary was just really dynamic. And she basically organised for the twins, Hans and Hannah, to come over on the Kindertransport, and for my aunt to come over with a nurse training permit, although my aunt didn't like nursing, she wanted to work in business, and for my grandmother to come on a domestic visa and actually look after her own mother, so Mary's mother. And so in July, my mother and my uncle, who were then 10, came on the Kindertransport. This is my mother's identity card. There you can see her with her plaques. So where she's signed her name and where her name has been written, an extra name has been put. So her name is Hannah Ruth Korn, and Sarah has been added. And this was a state thing that Jewish women and girls had to add Sarah to their names, and Jewish men and boys had to add Israel to their names. And also you've got the big J here, and you've got the swastika signs. So this is my mother's handwriting. This is a very traditional German handwriting. And she got this identity card in February 1939, presumably in readiness really for leaving in what happened to be July 39.
I don't remember leaving. I don't remember being on the platform saying goodbye, but I'm sure my father would have been there as well as my mother. I remember going through Holland and kind ladies giving us sticky buns and lemonade. I remember arriving and going onto the boat and having to say goodbye to my brother at that point, because he was going to go with the boys and I was going with the girls, and I shared a cabin with a girl from Rostock, and I was dying to go on the top bunk, but she was younger than me, so I thought, well, maybe I'd better be magnanimous, so I was on this bottom bunk, and I remember, a paper bag with white bread, which was extraordinary, and I think it was an orange and a banana, which were all given. And because I'd done a bit of English, and my brother had been to a Jewish horticultural school, boarding school for a little while, which I thought would discipline him a bit, because he was quite wild, he'd sort of stand behind me and say, ask them the time. I beg your pardon, do you know how late it is? That sort of thing. But it was useful, having a few words. I was also worried that we were going to Liverpool Street, because I thought we were going to London. And I thought Liverpool was somewhere else. However, we arrived in this great big hall. This lady came along. I was clutching a doll. I think all sort of 10-year-olds, German 10-year-olds still clutch dolls. I clutched this doll that I named Evelyn, because I thought it was madly English. And this lady came along and said, I'm your Aunt Mary.
When they got to England, my mother and uncle were sent to boarding schools, and so they had most of their secondary education here in this country. And this is the family once they were here in England. This was taken in 1945. So my mum and her brother were 17, and their sister's 24, and it feels like they've all sort of dressed up for the occasion and done their hair really nicely. And it's just, to me, they've been in the country in England since 1939, and it just sort of represents a sense of that they're more settled and happier, really. What happened to my grandfather was that he was too old to get a visa. He was 51. He was too old to get any sort of domestic visa work permit. On the day that my grandmother left to come to England, which was in August 1939, he crossed the border into Belgium, hoping that it'd be safe there. But of course the Nazis occupied Belgium. So then he crossed into France, and eventually he was picked up and sent to a camp called the Camp de Geur, which is in the Pyrenees, and he was there for 2 or 3 years, and we've got letters from him from that time. Yes, yeah. And it wasn't a concentration camp. But then in 1942, they rounded, the French and the Nazis actually rounded up all the people in that camp, sent them to Drancy, which is a place near Paris, which was like the collection point for people, and then sent them all to Auschwitz. And so we have seen from the records that he was murdered in Auschwitz in July 1942. So that's a good example of how, if there's no safe route available, people are going to perish. So when you look at all the ways in which my parents and their families got out of Germany, you've got the Kindertransport, you've got domestic visas, you've got nurse visas. So these are clearly safe routes. They didn't involve anybody doing a dangerous journey. They were all on an organised journey, and that when the people arrived here, they had the papers to be able to come into the country. When we think about refugees now, one of the things that we're asking for is more and better safe routes. So one of the images that's in people's minds is of people coming on boats and doing very dangerous journeys, or coming in lorries. But there are a number of safe routes already in place which could be expanded, or new ones could be developed. One is family reunion, so that people can have their children come and join them here. One is the resettlement schemes, like for Syria and Afghanistan, where a certain number of people, the UK agrees to take a certain number of people here as refugees. There are also other ideas about what could help and could create more ways in which people could get here safely. One is to expand the family reunion route, so that it's not just children, but children who are here could apply to be reunited and have their parents come over, or other members of their extended family. So that would make it safer for people to come. The other is to expand the resettlement routes by having it in relation to more countries, but also to use the ones we've already got better, because we say we'll take a few thousand people and actually we only take a few hundred. And the other thing would be to develop a new type of visa, like a humanitarian visa, where somebody, instead of having to get to this country in order to apply for asylum, could, probably not in their own country, but basically could go to a British embassy, probably in a neighbouring country, and apply from there. And that would save them doing these dangerous journeys if they got the papers all sorted out at a British embassy in a neighbouring country to their own. And then they would be able to get here safely. So I think it's really interesting if you look at the different ways in which my family, and it is just, mine and my twin sister Helen's family, it's not like lots and lots of people, all the different routes they came. And when I looked at it closely, I realised that these were all safe routes. They were all routes that were determined in advance so that people could get here safely. And nowadays, that's one of the things that we at Renicas are calling for, that we need to have safe routes. And we can look back and think, well, we managed it in 1939, surely we can manage it now. One of the things I think is really interesting about the Kindertransport is it wasn't a government scheme. It was organised by the Jewish community with support from the Quakers and other Christian organisations. And so it was very much a community coming together and using their power to help people, and in this case to help children. And they organised the actual arrangements with the liaising with Jewish organisations in Germany, creating lists of who was eligible. What the government did was they provided a sort of visa, almost like a visa waiver scheme, so that everybody got visas. But the communities all provided the funding, and it cost £50 for each child. which obviously was worth more in those days. First of all, the communities had to persuade the government that this was a good idea, and that involved quite a lot of persuasion. And then once they did, this Kindertransport, the one from Germany and Austria, ran from the 1st of December 1938, so just a few weeks after the Kristallnacht, and it ran until the day before the Second World War started. The other Kindertransport that you'll have heard of is Nicholas Winton Kindertransport from Czechoslovakia, and that ran similar sort of times. So nowadays, of course, we would never run a scheme where we separated the children from their parents. And as we know, most of the children who came on the Kindertransport, their parents died in the Holocaust, so they never saw them again. But the idea of actually arranging something in advance so people know that they'll be safe en route is really important. And this is much later. It's my mum with my dad, so that they were married for 62 years. And I really like this picture because they love taking walks around the Chilterns. I think that's where it is. And and just the whole thing about, with refugees, they have such a difficult time, and then time moves on and life moves on.